a research paper. For most of you, this paper will be based on a review of the scientific literature. Some of you may be doing research in labs, and for those students, you may write your paper on the project that you're working on in the lab, but it will require two things. One is the agreement from your principal investigator that you can write your paper on the project that you're working on in their lab. And two, you'll have to inform me so that I can determine whether or not the project has the physiology content that's required for this project. For most of the semester, this course will be independent study. You're responsible for all the assignments that I post on the 3095 Canvas website. And I recommend that you check this site at least weekly so that you can know about assignments and due dates and if there are any class announcements. And if you miss an assignment, that will be a deduction from the points that you earn for the semester. Now, fortunately, there's not a lot of assignments that you'll have to make sure that you know the deadline for. There's just a few, but you should pay attention and make sure that everything is up to date. I will post narrated versions of the PowerPoint presentation given in each class session, and I recommend that you attend them. However, attendance is not required, and if it doesn't fit your schedule, then it's okay if you only pay attention to the narrated PowerPoints and not show up for class. However, if that's your plan, I'd like you to inform me that that's what you're going to do so that we don't look for you for class sessions. These presentations are designed to give you information that I hope will help you understand what's expected for this project, that will help you begin your literature review, will help you connect with a faculty advisor, build an outline for your paper, use your outline to generate a rough draft, and at the end of the semester, turn your rough draft into a final draft. I want to say right now that for anyone in this class, if you need a faculty advisor for your project, I'm perfectly willing to do that for you, to be your faculty advisor for whatever physiological project you pick. However, if there's someone else that you'd like to work with, I'm okay with that too, as long as they're on board with this project and they're going to be willing to be your advisor for the semester. So it will become important for you to figure out, number one, what's your project, and number two, who would you like to work with as your faculty advisor? If you find a faculty advisor outside of the physiology faculty or inside the physiology faculty, you need to make sure that they know what the requirements of this course are for the semester, and I would suggest that you share our syllabus with them, and also that you send me an email telling me that who you're planning to work with, and carbon copy CC to the person who will be your faculty advisor so that I know that they're seeing what you're sending to me. It's better to do that sooner rather than later. The semester is going to go by quickly, and the sooner you know who you're going to be working with, the more quickly you can get started on your project. Your objectives will be to pick a physiologically relevant topic. And when we say physiologically relevant, we would like it to be basic science, not necessarily clinical science. We'd like you to search the recently published literature. For the purposes of this course, that represents the last 10 years. For scientific papers on your topic, you will be expected to read and understand the research papers that you find. From your initial search, you'll have to narrow your focus to a few papers and select one or two of them to be the primary focus of your research report. We recommend 2 papers. You'll also need to start to gather some information that will be secondary resources, and we recommend 6 research papers so that you can build a bibliography that supports the information that you report in your final paper. You'll have to organize that information eventually in a few weeks into an outline, develop that outline into a rough draft, and revise your rough draft into a final paper. First step, of course, is to find a physiologically relevant topic. It should be related to human physiology, but I want to be very clear that even though it's related to human physiology, the use of animal models, even Goldie Gopher, is okay. We find that the animal model studies often give us more in-depth information than human studies alone. And to be honest, that's because we can be more invasive when we do animal studies, which means we can collect more information. It can be related to a disease, but it doesn't have to be related to a disease. If it is it related to your health? Is it related to the health of a family member? Perhaps that's your reason for wanting to search that particular topic. That's okay. If you're having trouble thinking about a topic, one of the things to think about is what were some of the topics that you covered in the Principles of Physiology class, Physiology 3061. Is there something that you covered there? Cardiovascular, respiratory, kidney, digestive tract, skeletal muscle, nervous system, that you think you'd like to learn more about, read some research papers, and then write a research report. As I said earlier, we expect you to write your paper under the guidance of a faculty advisor. Next week, I will be providing some of the available faculty and their expertise so that you can have some people to choose from. Your advisors should help you with choosing your articles. They can help you with discussing the content of the articles, especially if you're having trouble understanding what the rationale for an experiment is or what a particular experimental technique is about. They will evaluate the outline that you write. They will evaluate the written rough draft that you write. Hopefully within a few days of receipt, and give you feedback in a week or so. Checking on your scientific content and on your ability to put your thoughts together, and giving you feedback that will help you make the next step more smoothly. Eventually, the person who grades your final draft will be your faculty advisor, so that's another thing to consider. And they will grade it for its scientific content. It will also have some points assigned to your composition skills and your ability to take criticism or comments and turn those into modifications or revisions of your paper. So, you're going to search for recent scientific papers, doing a literature review. It will be from the last 10 years. One of the things to do is to, when you're trying to search for something online, is to think of keywords related to your topic and use scientific search engines to find your research papers. It doesn't necessarily matter which search engine you use. One of the most common ones used is PubMed, or perhaps Medline, and many of you are familiar with Google Scholar. It doesn't matter what search engine you use, it matters how you use your search engine to find scientific papers. In terms of topics, I usually tell students, I don't eliminate a topic until I know what the literature says. If the literature says there's lots of material out there, then perhaps it's something you can use as a topic for your research paper. If the literature says all of the relevant work was done 15 years ago and there's no new papers, well, then that's a good indication that it might be time to think of another topic, something that is still being researched so that you can write on something that's current and relevant. When I say that your research papers or reference papers should be basic science literature, that means it's research that's designed to answer a question. It's research that includes background information. Why did they do this experiment in the first place? They'll give you background information to let you know why this was a relevant experiment to do. They'll talk about the planning of their research and the analysis and the methods that they did for data collection, the analysis of the data, the results that they gathered, and discuss how those new results help fill in some information that we did not have before. Review articles and clinical case studies provide perhaps context for what you're writing, but what you're writing is essentially a review article. And so your primary papers should not be review articles. You don't want to write a review of a review. And the overviews that you get from medical websites and Wikipedia are fine for getting definitions, but that's not research. You want to look at research papers designed to answer a hypothesis, that did experiments, collected data, and did data analysis and interpreted their data. That's what research literature should be. Once you've decided on a topic, you should look through the papers you found and designate a couple of those papers as your primary sources. The other papers that you found, you have to decide, do they provide me information that I will use as I write my review? Or will they not be useful, so we pass them, put them to the side? You'll want to find a cadre of papers, a group of papers, that will help you to share with your reader what you've learned and why it's relevant. It may sound obvious, but before you begin to write, research your papers. Read your papers. If you don't understand what's in them, if there's a term that you don't understand, look it up. That's one of the beautiful things about having the internet at our fingertips, is that if there's a word we don't understand, if there's a technique we don't understand, if there's a reagent that we don't understand, if there's an animal model that we don't understand, we can look them up and get more information, and then we can include what we find in what we use and what we put together for our paper. You'll want to think about, for your primary papers, what was the author's hypothesis? What was the major question they were trying to answer? And then think about how their design of their experiments tested that question and tried to provide more information to resolve the question. As you look at their data, you'll think about what were their key experimental findings and how they interpreted their data. Was their data strongly supporting a conclusion or moderately supporting a conclusion? Were there some places where it was kind of equivocal? Those are things you'll have to figure out as you read and digest the papers that you will find during your literature review. Here are a few thoughts on scientific writing. William Zinsser said that writing, thinking, and learning are the same process. And there is some evidence that when we write about the things that we have learned, it changes the way we understand them or the way we remember them in our brain. And so for that reason, the taking of information from one source and converting it into our own words as we write a new document is a valuable tool. Antoine Lavoisier said, "It is impossible to dissociate language from science or science from language because every natural science involves three things. One being the sequence of phenomena on which the science is based. The second is that the abstract concepts which the phenomenon call to mind. And the third is the words that we use to express that concept. And therefore, to call forth a concept, we need to think of the right word to describe it." I love this quote because when we view something in the world, we come to a point where we have to think about how would we describe what we've seen to other people, and this is especially true in science. In science, you make an observation, you record your observation, and then you report it to other scientists, and hopefully they will understand exactly what you saw based on the way you report it. And that means for science, we have to use a language that is precise, a language that is unambiguous, so that it brings to mind a vivid description of the observables that are out there in the world. You'll organize your information into this outline that includes an introduction, which has background information. It talks about the major question. You'll describe the methods in your primary papers. You'll show some of the results, and for this I do suggest that you think about, for the papers I've read, are there tables or figures that I'd like to incorporate into my paper? It's the old expression, a picture's worth 1,000 words. If you are trying to describe something that is some experimental that is been evaluated by graphing data, it's easier for your audience to understand what you mean if you show them the graph. And then they can look at that graph, the trend that's shown in the graph, and read your words, and the result of the two becomes a very clear explanation of what has happened. So don't be afraid of copying a figure out of a published document and including it in your review, as long as you give the appropriate citation in your text. Then it's not plagiarism, it's showing the appropriate example to inform your reader. I would like you to look at the discussion sections of the papers and then describe to your readers how the authors interpreted their own work. But I would also like you to think about how do you feel about their interpretation and to make your own conclusions from evaluating their data. And if you conclude that they've done a good job, that's fine. If you say, I look at this figure and it's not as convincing as the authors have suggested, that's okay too. We want to see some of your opinion in your review article. And of course, your paper will require a bibliography. If you do not cite your sources, then myself or your faculty advisors will call you out, because scientific writing requires that you tell your reader where you learned these facts that you're reporting. You take an outline, and a schematic outline is shown on the left of this figure. Eventually, you can take that outline and you can turn it into a rough draft, and a well-constructed outline is basically looking at each of the bullet points of the outline and filling in the information that describes that bullet point. If you can do that, as you pass through the substance of your outline, you will create your rough draft. You can, of course, read, proofread, evaluate, revise once you get all of that information into the rough draft. But the outline provides the structure, and hopefully it has a good logical flow so that a statement is made, it is supported by facts, and then supporting information continues to grow so that you can provide your reader with a clear argument or a clear discussion of whatever your topic area is. When you submit a rough draft, your faculty advisor will take a look at it. They may, in seeing your rough draft, come up with some suggestions. Some of them may be drastic, like, oh, this first paragraph needs to be moved after this last paragraph on this page. This paragraph in the middle needs to be removed altogether. It doesn't work. And perhaps this sentence needs to be edited. Let's just remove a bit. Eventually, that means that your rough draft gets improved by the suggestions, and you write a final draft that's more cohesive and tells your story in the best way possible. So, to review, you'll select a physiologically relevant topic. You'll search for recently published scientific papers on your topic. Narrow your search to one or two primary papers. That will be your focal point. You'll read and understand your primary papers and select additional research reports as support materials. You'll organize this information into an outline. develop your outline into a rough draft, and revise your rough draft into a final draft. And that will be our semester. For your final paper, we will grade it on the information that you include in your introduction and hypothesis statement. That includes the background information and what was the major question. We'll look at your summary of your major papers. How did they do their experiments? What data did they collect? We'll also examine how you report the author's interpretation of the data, and your own interpretation of the data. We want you to write well, and that was part of this exercise as well. We want to try to give you some tools to become effective scientific writers. However, since for many of you this may be the first time you've been asked to write a scientific paper, we won't make that a major portion of grading your paper. The quality of your writing will count towards your score, but it counts to a lesser degree than some of the content of your paper. So we're going to grade mostly on content and not mostly on quality of your ability to express yourself. That being said, there's no excuse for poor writing skills. We want you to try to get better as the semester progresses. You have an assignment this week, due by midnight on Wednesday. On the Canvas site, submit 2 topics you find interesting in physiology. State what makes them interesting to you. And if you think these might be topics that you'd like to write about for your research paper, you can identify that. If you've located an online source that provides some information on the topic, you can include that in what you submit online. And after reading what the class submits, I will provide a summary at our meeting either on Friday or next Monday. Thank you for your attention. Good luck, and we'll see you next week.